Ooh, you see that one?
Would you ever date a bisexual guy, Amber?
No. I just wouldn't be comfortable with it. And I don't know why. I just feel that way.
Amber Rose isn't the only one to express this sentiment. A Glamour survey found that 63% of women respondents wouldn't date a man who has ever had sex with another man, and a recent study found that straight women rate bi men as less attractive than straight men. It's not uncommon for people to feel uneasy about bi men. They're not quite sure why, but even after overcoming their homophobia, acknowledging prejudices, there's still something that's just not quite right about bi men. In the 1970s, when the gay movement really found its footing and properly entered the public consciousness, bisexuals were still sidelined, even while beginning to organise with bi-specific organisations and activism or working with the gay movement. The gay community wouldn't acknowledge them, and straight people didn't even really know what a bisexual was unless they listened to David Bowie. According to Mark Wilkinson's research of the UK paper The Times, the word bisexual hadn't been so commonly used to refer to sexual orientation before the 1980s. He found that if you were talking about bisexuality, you were far more likely to be talking about something unisex, like a bisexual item of clothing. A woman might proudly sport her bisexual coat without any awareness as to what that connotation might have to a glam rocker. Bisexuals rarely appeared in film, and when they did, they never used the B word. Bi men of 80s cinema were portrayed as violent, drug addicts, murderers.
Let's anything that moves!
But why would that be? What was happening that shifted our concept of bisexual men from androgynous feminine boy rock stars to violent criminals? It's 1987, and the lady in her bisexual coat picks up a copy of the New York Times, and the cover reads, AIDS Spectre for Women, the Bisexual Man. HIV/AIDS was first reported in 1981. It would take years to figure out exactly what this disease was and how to treat it. The virus seemed to be predominantly impacting the gay community, so much so that AIDS was considered a gay disease, originally called GRID, gay-related immune deficiency. There was nothing uniquely gay about HIV, it was just that it could be sexually transmitted, and it just happened to be transmitting fastest in the gay population. But most people, straight people, saw this as a gay disease for gay men. In 1988, Cosmo printed an article about AIDS, which assured its mostly straight woman readership that most heterosexuals are not at risk for AIDS. It was impossible, they said, to transmit AIDS in the missionary position. I'm just trying to imagine why they think the position is relevant. Like, is it a butt thing? Because I feel like it's butts related. This was an unbelievably absurd assumption, clearly based on a moralistic perspective on HIV. If you have normal, good, straight Christian sex with your spouse, you won't get it. This enraged activists, because this is literally the kind of information which leads to people dying. Just use a condom. Misinformation means death. We know this. In this pandemic, we knew it then. Early on, governments felt free to brush off concerns about HIV because, from their perspective, it was only impacting a demographic they actively hated. What the New York Times was proposing on their cover was that AIDS was not only for gay men. AIDS was coming for straight women. And it was bisexuals who were going to give it to them. 7 years ago, a Miami office worker had an affair with a bisexual man. She recalls that his confusion about sexual orientation was one of the things that made her feel tender toward him. Now she wonders if she should get a blood test for the AIDS virus. She might also be distressed to learn that bisexuals are often secretive and complex men who, experts say, probably would not acknowledge homosexual activity even if questioned about it. Indeed, some cannot even admit such behaviour to themselves. Homosexuals have been out of the closet a long time, but bisexuals have not, said the president of the 5,000-member American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors and Therapists. Straight women are going to discover some very unpleasant news about some men they have known. The article isn't really about preparing people for how to survive in the context of an HIV epidemic. The article wants to sensationalize this fear. It wants you, the straight reader, on edge. It wants you to question your husband, your ex-boyfriend, the man you had a one-night stand with 3 years ago. If the guy won't tell me, I could only guess, said the Miami office worker. Her solution no sex with any man until she's confident of her safety. But even then, the guy could be a good liar, she noted. Some women believe they can recognize bisexual men. I don't care how much they want to cover it up, their little effeminate ways tip you off. The article never mentions condoms. Nothing about safe sex. Like, imagine an article introducing you to the threat of COVID, but not mentioning that you should wear a mask. What's the point of warning people about a virus, but not telling them how to protect themselves from it? But to the writer of this article, the threat isn't AIDS. The threat is bi men. The Spectre. In 1989, Cosmo published an article called When a Wife Discovers Her Husband is Bisexual. The point of this article was to promote the bisexual bridge theory, the idea that bi men were the vectors of transmission between gay and straight populations. They had clearly changed their tune on the missionary position. This is bad graphic design, by the way. Pink text on a pink sleeve. Come on. You can't trust these people. The article begins by describing a woman who comes home one day to find her husband cheating on her. Cindy feels like she's the only woman in the world to go through this, but the article assures her that no, actually, millions of women have unwittingly fallen for bisexuals, because the horror does not lie in his unfaithfulness, but in his bisexuality, which in this context is synonymous with cheater. The article never really separates bisexual men from cheaters. To Cosmo, the bisexual existence is inherently non-monogamous, an idea we explored in the Bi Women video. They say that bi men need a gay outlet, so it's best to either divorce now or find a way to tolerate his cheating, or at the very least buy him a dirty gay magazine. Wives who know their husbands are bisexual can at least take steps to protect themselves from venereal diseases. Wives who don't know are in mortal danger. More women have contracted the AIDS virus from bisexuals than in any other way, except sharing needles or having sex with IV drug users. Wow, women have contracted the AIDS virus from bisexuals more than any other way, except for the other ways that are more common. They set up this whole article to make it feel beyond a shadow of a doubt that no bisexual is capable of monogamy, and then at the end, they remind you that AIDS is out there, and now you know you can use this article to help figure out if your husband is a bisexual, and if you need protection from AIDS. Few women realize how many bisexual men there are and how risky it is to get involved with them. It is astonishing that so few bisexual men are found out, because in general, they have more sex with their wives than the average heterosexual, and more sex with men than the average homosexual. There's no citation for this. They're just making stuff up, I feel like. Like, this idea of the oversexed bisexual is so contrary to the modern idea of the bisexual disaster who doesn't know how to talk to anyone. It's wild. So now you've got the fear. Here's how to tell if your man might be a secret bisexual. If a man's eyes follow other men, be very cautious. Be suspicious if he seems intensely interested in how other men dress. Occasionally, heterosexual men are really interested in this, but it is not common. If he looks into another man's eyes for even a microsecond, longer than it takes to make socially acceptable eye contact, beware. Heterosexual men do not do it. Bisexuals and gays are prevalent in such narcissistic businesses as theatre, fashion, the beauty industry, art and design, and fitness. Many bisexuals are also attracted to the helping professions, medicine, social work, counselling. Is your partner talented? Artistic? Maybe he spent a decade in medical school so he can dedicate his life to helping others. Well, you know what that means, ladies. They basically just listed all the jobs you would want your husband to have, like famous actor or a doctor. They're like, no, that makes him bisexual. Fear him. Clearly this article, like the New York Times article and various other articles popping up all over the place at the time, wasn't just about a fair and reasonable concern for sexual health and safety. Bisexual men were in danger because AIDS was devastating the community, but this article was about making straight women frightened, not just of AIDS, but of bisexuals. On the whole, it doesn't seem like bi men were ever really a major vector for transmission of HIV from gay to straight communities, though of course it did happen sometimes tragically. And as they said before, it was more common for straight people to contract HIV through IV drug use, or having sex with an IV drug user. And on top of that, thousands of hospital patients were being infected through blood transfusions because of blood banks who didn't want to pay to test the blood for HIV. Some research I found from the 90s showed that bi men were actually having much safer sex with men, being more likely to use condoms for penetration. Bisexuals who were out as bi, who identified as bi, may have been more likely to have safer sex. But the fear of bi men, the spectre, meant that a lot of guys were scared to come out, so bi men stayed in the closet. It seems like the social stigma kept bi men closeted when actually being out would have supported a safer sexual lifestyle. In 1989, Alison Gertz began to share her story about how she contracted HIV in 1982 through a one-night stand with a bisexual man. Alison was from a well-off family. She was white, straight. As the New York Times put it, Alison L. Gertz wasn't supposed to get AIDS. Gertz had only been 16 when she contracted HIV. She was on the pill, so she didn't use a condom, because at the time, people didn't really know about AIDS. Alison Gertz became an activist helping to spread information about safe sex. She died when she was only 26. Alison Gertz was used as an example of why we should be afraid of bi men. A side effect of this fear, whether intentional or not, was that it caused people and governments to invest more in protecting people from HIV. The government doesn't really care about queer people, poor people, people with drug problems, people of colour, but if women like Alison Gertz were in danger, that was something worth fighting against. Women like Alison were innocent enough to avoid this sinner's disease, but they might be tricked by a bi man. It's his fault. It's the queer's fault, never hers. That is a narrative which changes people's perspectives on AIDS. But this also requires, for the first time in history, that we acknowledge that bisexuality exists. As Kenji Yoshino put it, HIV has forced straights to confess the bisexual they would otherwise deny. When I was in high school in America, they actually showed us the Alison Gertz film in sex education class. They wanted to scare us, and it worked. I saw a number of films when I was younger about AIDS besides the Alison Gertz film, including Philadelphia, the Captain Planet episode about AIDS. I saw straight men with AIDS. I saw gay men with AIDS. I saw straight women with AIDS. And that was all good. Those stories needed to be told. But I never, ever saw a bi man with AIDS. In his book, The AIDS Movie, Kylo Patrick R. Hart studied 32 AIDS-related films made before the year 2000 with 76 characters who had AIDS. 68.4% of the characters were gay men, and none of the characters were bi men. Hart's study showed that the only characters who weren't portrayed to ever have AIDS were lesbians and bi men. Film and television can give a face to victims. It can help people empathize with a group they previously knew nothing about or even dehumanized. Bi men were not given this treatment. We were just warned about them, encouraged to fear them, distrust them, until that spectre became what a bi man was in the minds of the general public. Films weren't made for bi men. Articles about bi men were not written for bi men. A bi man could never be the hero of any story. So we wanted to keep straight women safe, but there was less of an effort to keep bisexual men safe, even when working on gay men's safety. Bisexual activist and sex educator David Laurier had trouble convincing any programming to include HIV prevention for bisexual men. In 1982, there was a wellness conference at UC Medical Center. Every single one of the people on the main platform refused to say the word bisexual. David Laurier was a major bisexual activist from the 70s to the early 90s, founding member of the San Francisco Bi Center. He was a part of a group of bisexual activists who were also doctors and sexologists and recognized the urgency of the AIDS crisis and helped shape the response to it, based in sex positivity as opposed to fear tactics, and recognizing women as a potential risk group. His work was incorporated into internationally utilized programs, except for the importance of recognizing bisexual men's education and safety. David Laurier died in 1992 from AIDS-related kidney failure. A few months before his death, Laurier said this in an interview. As horrible as it is, I think AIDS brought bisexuality out of the closet. You can feel the lack of presence of older bi men in bi activism. You can feel the lack of younger bi men too. Bi men only make up about a quarter of the bi community now. Guys are scared to be out as bi. And while it's true that people held a lot of prejudice and resentment towards bisexuals before the 80s, the impact of AIDS can't be understated. Bi activist Stephen Donaldson once said, Demographically, one major difference between the movements of the 1970s and early 1990s is the noticeable preponderance of bi men in the 1970s, whereas bi women now outnumber men by far, both in leadership and grassroots levels. The change may reflect how AIDS has decimated the male population and stigmatized bi men as AIDS infectors of the straight majority. Donaldson was another bi activist. You might have heard of him as co-founder of the very first American gay student organization in 1967. He died of AIDS-related illness in 1996. People still often think of bi men as the spectre. And up until 2015, any man who had ever had sex with a man was banned in the US from giving blood, regardless of whether he was having safe sex or whether he tested negative for HIV. The UK had a similar law up until 2011, and both countries still have limitations on blood donations from men who have sex with men. We have all lived in, and many of us were raised in, a world where this stigma still has a very real, lasting impact. We live in a world where men's bisexuality is in the public consciousness primarily because of scapegoating during a global pandemic. For most people watching this video, based on my YouTube demographics, you grew up in a world where the very concept of bisexual men existing was shaped by the kind of media we've just looked at. I realized while researching this that nothing ever kind of went back to normal after the AIDS crisis. In some places, the threat of AIDS is an ever-present danger, but even where it isn't, the way we approach sex has never gone back to how it was before. HIV is here to stay. It's part of our realities now. HIV changed our attitude towards sexuality. The kind of biphobia targeted at bi men is much bigger than just the idea that they might have HIV. It's the idea that bi men are liars, bi men are unfaithful, bi men can't control their sexual urges. A 1999 study found that heterosexuals had a lower opinion of bisexual men than any other group assessed, including religious groups, racial groups, ethnic groups, political groups, gay men and lesbians, everyone except for IV drug users. This is the world that has shaped our attitudes towards bisexuality, a world without bi men like David Luria and Stephen Donaldson, who helped shape not just the bi community but gay rights and AIDS activism as well. A world where generations of bi men died, while some just stayed closeted for fear of becoming the spectre in the eyes of those they loved. Bisexual was the word used by activists who fought for us and who fought against homophobia and AIDS, but most people became aware of bisexuality because of AIDS. Bisexual was the word used by the media to stir up fear, to sensationalize, to demonize bi men. Jonathan David White speculates that the evil bi man of the 80s was then transposed onto bi women for films in the 90s, such as Basic Instinct. So much of our perspective on bi people today is shaped by this crucial coming out moment in our history. Bisexuality came into mainstream consciousness because of AIDS, and all the prejudice and hatred and fear-mongering that came with it shaped our perception of bisexuality. Today, we're far more open-minded and accepting of LGBT people, except when we're not. And sometimes we just can't quite put our fingers on the reason why. Something just doesn't quite feel right. The word bisexual just feels wrong somehow. Like the spectre is still there, thinly visible out of the corner of your eye. Thank you to all my patrons, and a special thanks to Kat R, Danny Aidenstone, Siobhan, Aaron, AJ, Eric Parkinson, Charis Edwards, Dweebin, ES, Gay Steve, Jamie, Juicy Fantasy Queen Plant Hookups, Jules, Julius, Kiki, Lord Asriel, Marla, Nico, Nina, Odd Beyond the Frizzy, Pregnant Seinfeld, Rava Rub, Rebecca Peacock, Rock the Shell, Sarah R, Thav Radmussen, Sindri LaRose, Soy, Spencer, Straw Fox, Susie S, Talon, and Tina Gigya. Also a special thanks to Kate G, who helped me get a copy of the Cosmo article.